Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today we'll be talking about the International Baccalaureate. Marie Vivas is University Relations Manager, IB Americas, for the International Baccalaureate. Marie speaks 6 languages and spent 9 years in Ecuador at the Colegio Americano de Quito. Sara Marchello, who goes by Sally, is University Registrar at the College of William & Mary in Virginia. Sally manages the academic records for all William & Mary students and alumni. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, Marie, if we could start with you. Not a crazy question, I think, but what is the International Baccalaureate?
Well, the International Baccalaureate is actually an academic curriculum. It is a continuum. It starts with a primary year program and goes all the way through the diploma program, which is really what we're going to talk about today. The diploma program is the last 2 years of the IB program, and it consists of 6 courses taken across a 2-year period, which are related to each other in a central course, core course that's called Theory of Knowledge. There are 6 groups of subjects: native language, second language, social sciences, mathematics, science, and then a 6th group subject, which is usually in the arts or in a second subject of a student's choice. So all of those 6 subjects plus the core Theory of Knowledge are the academic end of it. Students must write a 4,000-word extended essay, which is a research paper at the end of their time in the International Baccalaureate. All courses are externally moderated by exams at the end of the course, but also internally moderated throughout the course. And then there is an extra component that's called Creativity Action Service, which of course the words tell it all themselves. Students are asked to be engaged and involved in the community. It was created originally to promote education across curricula for students who were living in other parts of the world and needed to come home to wherever their country was with a strong academic curriculum. Now it's seen growth all over the planet, including the U.S.
Well, in terms of the U.S., how many schools in the United States use the IB?
Over 2,000 schools in the United States use the IB program. It could be diploma, it could be primary years, it could be middle years. It is actually the largest growing segment of IB in the world.
Fair enough. And at William & Mary, how do you deal with the IB? I assume you see lots of students with IB diplomas. How do you treat those?
We view, first of all, the IB as an exceptional college preparatory curriculum. So for students looking for the best way to prepare for admission to William & Mary or preparation for a school like William & Mary, we certainly endorse it. We see students who have pursued the diploma, but also students who are just enrolling in IB courses with a certificate in mind, and in either case, they certainly provide strong preparation. Then once a student enrolls at William & Mary, we do grant credit based on exam scores for a number of the IB courses.
Whether or not it's a diploma or a certificate.
That's right, exactly. Some institutions go beyond the course-by-course evaluation and award some kind of endorsement for the diploma itself. We've looked at that. We haven't done it so far, but certainly the extended essay is something worth looking at in terms of the lower division writing requirement or that sort of thing. So for now, it's course-by-course, but some schools are beginning to look at the diploma in toto as well.
And if you like what Marie has to say today, you're going to change everything
Run
at
back
William
to my
Mary.
Faculty, that's right.
Well, speaking of the faculty,
Yes.
who makes these determinations?
Right. At my institution and most of William & Mary's peers, we believe strongly in faculty governance, and the faculty do set academic policy. So as the university registrar, I work with faculty to make sure they have all the information that they need to have in order to make decisions about credit of all varieties, whether it's our own William & Mary curriculum, transfer credit, or IB and AP test equivalencies.
Fair enough. And who do you report to, if you don't mind me asking?
I report to the provost of the college. He's the chief academic officer, and so do all of the academic deans. And then I also work with the Educational Policy Committee, which is the faculty group that makes educational policy.
Fair enough. And Marie, you no doubt have had interactions with lots of registrars around the United States and throughout the world. What are some of the points that are usually the sticking points in terms of getting more credit for IB students?
Well, I think that in a lot of cases, registrars are looking to the faculty to give leadership on this. This is a fairly common and established pattern. It really requires a faculty review of each individual course. And I think if you're asking faculty to review several courses, not just one, they need to take their time to do it. So sometimes it becomes a little bit slower than we would like, but in all fairness, they want to look at the academic rigor, they want to look at content, they want to look at research that shows that students have been successful in the past. And I think that this is the job of the IB, to provide the information so that faculty can make sound decisions which support students coming with the IB.
But how do we know the IB is good in one high school versus another?
Well, there are two ways that students in IB courses are evaluated. There is an internal assessment that's done by the local teacher, and there are several internal assessments throughout the 2-year period. But then the IB also offers external moderation. Most courses have, throughout the 2-year period, at least one component is sent out and externally moderated. And then in addition to that, at the culmination of the course, there is an exam, a very difficult exam, which is completely externally moderated. And that's the exam that is used to determine the final grade in the course. So it is normed, it is dealt with by an assessment department in the IB, and there are examiners throughout the world that are given rubrics, and this is then taken by the IB staff and moderated. So it does actually have a great amount of external validation that has nothing to do with what's going on in the school. I will point out, though, that the internal assessment frequently is proof that things are being done well in the school as well.
But what about a student in the United States versus Canada or Mexico? Will a student who's in an IB course be held to the same standard?
Yes, they will. Examiners from all over the world read exams from all over the world. It is not done by country.
What about by language?
Well, the IB actually is in 3 official languages, as you well know: French, Spanish, and English. So all exams may be taken in one of those 3 languages. It really depends on the school as to what exam is taken in what language. However, all examiners are given the same rubrics and the same standards for evaluation.
Fair enough. And how would you compare the IB to the Advanced Placement Program?
You know, I don't like that question, but I will answer it anyway.
Well, I am the host of a show. I'm supposed to ask those questions.
It's a fair enough question. Let me start by saying that I actually have taught both IB and AP courses, and I know that they both offer academic excellence and rigor. So to start off, if a student were to ask me, is one better than the other, I would say it really depends on what kind of experience you're trying to have. The AP really is a great course in terms of content, and a student at the end of an AP course will also take an externally validated exam and be able to prove, yes, I have learned the content, and that's great. The IB, on the other hand, is really about the learning experience. Students are being asked to connect areas of learning, connect ways of learning, and they're being asked to write and reflect on their learning throughout a 2-year period. So in the sense that it's a continuous assessment, I would say that is one difference between the AP and the IB programs. Now, the other big difference really is the holistic approach of the IB. The idea that what you're learning in sciences is informed by what you're learning in your social sciences, and all of that is really based on how you use language in learning. Those are the kinds of ideas that the IB is very strong about presenting. And then, of course, we can't forget about the word international. The idea of international mindedness, of being rooted in your own local knowledge, but having a global awareness of how what you learn is impacting the world. I think that's a really key component to the International Baccalaureate. Like I said, both great programs, very different from each other.
Fair enough. And at William & Mary, how do you differentiate between students who come in with AP credits versus IB credits?
Well, we've done the review of both types of credits. As Marie mentioned, there is the ability for us to look at the curriculum for each subject or each course, and also look at the rubric for the external assessment, look at what they're doing for the internal assessment. And so because of that consistency internationally in the curriculum, we are able to look at the materials and match them to our course content and see where course equivalencies can be made, and also where maybe exemptions can be offered. AP offers the same sort of consistent, universal curricular materials that we can review. So in terms of course-to-course evaluation, it's fairly straightforward because of the materials that each of the entities can provide.
But then why did the state legislature in Virginia get involved in this? For viewers who may not be familiar, about 2 years ago, the Virginia state legislature actually, if I understand this correctly, mandated that the IB and the AP be treated in similar ways.
Right. The legislation requires that schools have policies on the acceptance of AP and IB to include the SL, which is the standard level. There's a higher level and standard level within IB. Why did the legislature get involved? I think there are two ways of answering that question. One is that I think there's public pressure, and so I think we have legislators who are very responsive to their constituents. And as Marie and I were discussing before the show, there's been a great deal of growth in the IB offerings in the U.S. and certainly in Virginia. So I think there's just more awareness of it. I think the other way to answer that is from a public policy perspective. In Virginia and in many, many states, there's a growing concern about the cost of higher education. And so governors, legislators, policymakers think that one way to keep higher education costs down is to shorten the time to degree. And so they look at these enriched high school experiences as a way of maybe reducing the time to degree from 4 years to 3.5, or from 5 years to 4, as the case may be. Yeah. So I think there was pressure in that regard as well. We now have an endorsement on the high school diploma that it gives an extra stamp to students who graduate from high school with the equivalent of 15 credits of college work. So that's just part of a larger public policy push.
Fair enough. What percentage of students at William & Mary graduate with less than 4 years of courses at William & Mary?
Right. Very few leave in less than 4 years because they choose to use this pre-collegiate credit as an opportunity to take time to do a double major, or to study abroad, or to take a semester to do a service project somewhere. So that happens to be the way things work at William & Mary and at other institutions like ours. But I think for a lot of students and families, the opportunity to graduate a semester a year early is an economic benefit, a true economic benefit.
But if it's an economic benefit and people aren't taking it, then how is that benefiting the people who are doing it or not doing it?
Well, in the case of our students who choose to stay for the full 4 years, they're benefiting in many other ways, whether it's by having an international experience through study abroad that they might not have been able to fit into their curriculum, or if it's by taking a semester off to do something very meaningful as part of their personal development.
Fair enough. And in terms of cost, Marie, let's say I'm a high school student and I like the IB and my parents like it and I want to take the IB. Do I pay any money to do it? Do I pay a fee for the exams? Does the high school pay the International Baccalaureate? How does that work?
Well, there are several ways in which this can be done. I mean, it really depends on the school, the region, the school district. There are schools where, and many of them international schools are like this, there is a school fee for the IB, but in addition to that, students will pay exam fees. In public schools and in schools where students need assistance, there is financial assistance for the IB. Title I schools, for example, have financial cooperation for the IB. The IB actually is very interested in making sure that access to the programs is for everyone who is qualified to do it. So there is a big effort on the part of the IB to keep working with governments and legislatures to make sure that students are not disqualified on the basis of economic access. And so to answer your question, there are a million ways to pay for the IB, but students who are qualified will find support.
Fair enough. And in terms of the IB, politically, we talked about politics a second ago. Is there political support or political opposition to the IB in the United States?
You hear a lot of different sides to this, of course. Many states and school districts have supported the IB and embraced it because it's a strong academic program, and they see the value for their students of becoming more internationally minded while experiencing academic depth. That said, there are always people out there who will argue, is the IB really worth the while? You know, that's a conversation that every state, every legislature, every country will come up against. I would say to you that indeed the experience of IB students throughout the world when they move into higher education is, yes, it is worth the while. And in terms of the United States, you can point to the tremendous growth across the country that the IB really is mostly a very accepted and acceptable program.
But what about like American history? Would a student who would normally be in a non-IB curriculum who's studying American history learn as much American history in the IB program?
Absolutely. You know, one of the IB courses is IB History of the Americas. And the idea behind the history course is that the student really has to have an in-depth understanding of their own country's, region's historical perspective before they can move on to reflect on world history. So the in-depth study of American history and American schools is actually very strong in the IB.
In fact, if I may, in Virginia, the students end up getting 2 years of that because it is a 2-year course. History of the Americas is an in-depth, integrative look that spans 2 years.
Fair enough. If we could shift to the issue of credits.
Sure.
This is something that's always intrigued me, which is why do we use credits as a measurement of academic progress? I mean, is there another way to do it? Have you thought about that? I'm assuming you and your registrar buddies get together at some conferences and talk about things.
It's interesting. That's been the subject of some recent essays in the literature. The credit hour as a concept really came about maybe 100 years ago in response to a wide array of inconsistencies in the way that academic knowledge was being measured. And so the credit hour, like the Carnegie unit that we hear about in primary and secondary school, was a way to bring some consistency and make it more meaningful. So if a bachelor's degree is 120 credit hours, that means the same thing at any institution that you attend. However, not every school uses the credit hour. So it's broadly used in Virginia, it's broadly used at public institutions throughout the US, but there are many, many, many schools that use a unit measure. And during our recent curriculum review, our faculty looked at other models and stuck with the credit hour for all of its pros and cons, just because of the consistency, because of the ease of transfer, and the universality of it.
Well, and speaking of universality and transfer credits, how do you deal with credits from high school students who are enrolled in courses, and do you award them credit at William & Mary?
We do. We refer to this as dual enrollment, and generally speaking, in fact, in almost all cases in Virginia, it's an arrangement between the high school and the community college. So the Virginia Community College system works with the local school divisions. We do award credit for this because of our agreement as a public institution in the state of Virginia with the VCCS, the Virginia Community College System. And this is true in many states. Many states even go so far as to have common course numbering systems. Virginia doesn't, but some do, to facilitate this. So we do see, and we're seeing an increase in dual enrollment. I was just at a meeting a couple weeks ago, though, of the State Committee on Transfer, at which we talked about the need for some new coordination around dual enrollment to make sure that the experience students are having in the high school classroom for which they're earning college credit really is consistent. Some of our peer institutions that are private do not award credit for those courses earned during high school. So there is variability regarding dual enrollment. Less variability, I would say, with AP and IB credits. Most of our peers either award credit or award exemptions for AP and IB.
And is that because you're comfortable with the quality of the average AP or IB?
It has more to do with the assurance of consistency and the external examination, as opposed to a grade that might be more subjective and is harder to norm. on a dual enrollment transcript, for example, whereas an AP5 or an IB7 has the same meaning no matter where the student studied.
But what about a student who's a good student but not a great student? Do they get credit at William and Mary?
How do you mean who's a good student but not a
Well, let's
great
say they
student?
took the IB and they got a 5, or they
Sure,
took
sure.
the AP and they got a 3.
Right. This review that I talked about is, and that Marie addressed as well, is pretty extensive. So when, for example, our modern languages faculty looked at the IB materials, they put cut scores in place. So a 6 and a 7 might award 6 credits. A 4 might just award that first course. I mean, a 5 might just award the first course. A 4 might just give them the foreign language proficiency but no credit. So we do differentiate based on the score, and that's true on the AP side as well.
And is that public information, or
It's published in the catalog.
In your
We
catalog?
created a grid for it, yes indeed.
and a prospective student could see that?
Absolutely, because we've also exported the grid and put it on the website, the address for which you gave at the beginning of the show.
Okay, fair enough.
Sure.
All right, Marie, what thoughts do you have in terms of what you would like universities to do with the IB that they're not doing now?
Well, I think that Virginia has taken leadership in this, actually. I think that standard level courses need to be reviewed in depth by faculties across not just the world, not just the country, but the world. And they need to see the kind of rigor and time and experiences that students are having in those courses. If there's one thing that I think families and IB professionals would like to see, is more attention paid to the standard level courses. In addition to that, I think that there are other ways to recognize IB students beyond credit granting, and that's something that institutions could start thinking about. Are there special scholarships for IB students? Are there direct entree into certain more competitive programs that IB students could be considered for? Are there types of residential housing that deals with the kind of international background that students have? So there are many, many ways in which universities could be looking at IB that I think that we need to start opening up. Students write a 4,000-word research paper. Is the extended essay a way to recognize the IB effort that a student has made in the IB? Is there a way to integrate CAS, Creativity Action Service, into how universities recognize students? And I think that this opens the door to a lot of different ways in which engaged students can come onto campuses and continue that kind of good work.
That was a really interesting answer. I wanted to follow up, if I could, about the issue of the residential. Where did you mean by that? That sounded like a very provocative thought.
Well, for example, many universities will have an environmental house that students choose to live in because they're interested in environmental issues. Or they'll have a language house, which, of course, for an international baccalaureate student that's coming directly with 2 languages at least, may be of interest. So frequently there's an application process to enter that type of residential arrangement. And maybe this is a way in which IB students could have some ease into entering these if they have shown through their IB courses that they have some dedication to these programs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sally, how would you deal with some of these suggestions?
Very intriguing, and I was nodding my head pretty enthusiastically during Marie's talk. We have at William and Mary, for example, a Sharpe Scholar program that's a freshman year program geared towards students who are interested in service. Very attractive to our IB diploma holders, and they are well represented within the Sharpe Scholars. And not only do they take special freshman seminars, but they're also set up to continue the kind of service work that they've been doing in high school. So that's a great example of kind of a way of continuing that vector for those students. I have a slight bias against the buildup of academic credit for the buildup of academic credit unto itself. I am a strong believer in the 4-year degree and in all of the personal development that goes on during those years as well. So I cringe a little bit when we talk about using programs like this just as a way to rush to the degree, in spite of the fact that that's a popular public policy stance right now. And so I much prefer talking about the other ways to recognize the benefit of the IB diploma and experience in college admissions and in getting students gearing them towards maybe living in the international house or towards maybe earlier study abroad. We're starting to see students doing study abroad in their second year because they're ready to do that. They do come with extra language skills. So really celebrating the excellent preparation that students get in the IB and the way in which it makes the college experience much more enriched, I think is just as exciting as talking about the accumulation of credits.
Well, fair enough. Well, we've accumulated a number of minutes. We've got one more minute to go. Marie, what would you like to add to that accumulation?
Well, I would like to second what Sally just said. IB students are learners. They're engaged, inquiring, internationally minded learners. So really, enrichment of the academic experience should be as much of value when we're discussing the IB as economic or credit granting. I really believe that if we look at that carefully, we will understand how important a program this is, especially in the transition from secondary to higher education.
Well, thank you both for coming on the show to talk about the International Baccalaureate. As we know here, and as our viewers will now know, it's a big growing area, so we both thank you. Well, I thank you. The show thanks you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about Marie Vivas or Sally Marchello, please visit ibo.org/IBA or wm.edu/registrar. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.